Welcome to World True Crime, where we delve into the darkest chapters of real-life mysteries and crimes from around the world. In today's story, we'll uncover the chilling case of Abigail Hernandez, whose strength and resilience defied unimaginable horrors. Join us as we explore the details of this haunting abduction and the survival story that followed. Every parent, in an attempt to protect and keep their child safe, tries to explain that trusting strangers can be dangerous. They emphasize that you shouldn't talk to strangers, follow them somewhere, and under no circumstances should you ever get into a stranger's car. Having these conversations is crucial, just like explaining the reasons behind these precautions and the potential consequences of ignoring them. The story of an American high school student named Abigail Hernandez serves as a powerful lesson illustrating what can happen when you're careless and too trusting of a stranger who at first glance seems to offer a helping hand during a tough situation. All Abigail did was hope that a kind guy would give her a ride home. But instead she ended up in the lair of a real monster. Abigail Maria Hernandez was born on October 12, 1998 in Manchester, New Hampshire, along the banks of the Merrimack River. She was the youngest of two daughters born to Ruben and Xenia Hernandez and grew up with her older sister Sarah, to whom she was very close. Abigail's mom worked as a nurse at a local hospital, while her dad was a sales agent. Overall, the Hernandez family was strong, happy, and pretty well off, but when Abigail was in middle school, her parents decided to separate not long after the divorce. Her father remarried and started a new family, while the daughters from his first marriage continued to live with their mom. Reuben still supported his older children financially, but their relationship dwindled to little more than birthday and Christmas greetings. From a young age, Abigail was an active, curious, and social child. She always had a ton of friends, and she constantly shifted between different hobbies and activities, eager to try everything and be everywhere. Abigail played sports. She was a talented artist, enjoyed photography, read a lot, and studied foreign languages, which she picked up effortlessly around the age of 12. Abigail became a member of a local outdoor club, regularly going on camping trips, hiking, and falling in love with the mountains. She also became pretty skilled in wilderness survival, putting those lessons to good use on various adventures. It's not surprising considering New Hampshire's natural beauty with its forests, mountains, and rivers. It's a paradise for outdoor activities, hiking and climbing. This is a state that attracts adventurers, thrill seekers, and nature lovers from all over the country. Abigail Hernandez's classmates described her as a brave, smart, friendly, and determined girl who could easily connect with people around her. She was the kind of person who could jump into a conversation about pretty much any topic, wasn't afraid of challenges, and always spread her optimism to everyone around her. Abigail wasn't one to sit still. She was always on the go, constantly moving and making big plans for her future. The summer of 2013 was packed with exciting events for Abigail when she returned to school. In September, she was full of stories about her summer vacation, where she'd been, what she'd seen, and all the things she'd managed to do. By this time, the 14-year-old had started a romantic relationship with a boy named Jimmy, who went to the same school and was a year older than her. Xenia, Abigail's mom, knew about the relationship and didn't mind her daughter dating him. Abigail vanished on her way home from school in early October 2013, with fall break and her 15th birthday just around the corner. Abigail was busy planning a hiking trip with other members of her outdoor club. She even received a pair of brand new hiking boots as a gift, but they were a little tight, so she decided to break them in by wearing them to school. On October 9th, Abigail went to school like any other day. After classes, she planned to take a stroll through a nearby park, but promised her mom she wouldn't be out too late. However, by around 5 p.m., when Abigail still hadn't come home, Xenia decided to call her, only to find that Abigail's phone was turned off. Worried but trying to stay calm, Xenia figured her daughter had probably met up with friends and maybe her phone had died. A couple of hours later, with no word from Abigail and unable to reach her, Xenia started to panic. She began calling Abigail's friends and teachers, trying to find out when she had left school and where she might have gone. The school informed her that Abigail had left right after classes ended and had said goodbye to her friends at the bus stop, where they all got on the school bus. Abigail, however, had chosen to walk home. None of Abigail's friends had seen her since she hadn't stopped by anyone's house, and she hadn't called anyone. Even Jimmy couldn't get in touch with her. Despite them having plans to meet up later that day, terrified Xenia, along with her older daughter Sarah, didn't waste any time and headed straight to the police station to report Abigail's disappearance. Since Abigail was a minor, the search for her began immediately. Investigators discovered that the last signal from her cell phone was picked up about a mile from her home. Almost immediately, news about the missing high school student started spreading across social media. Flyers with Abigail's photo, A description of the clothes she was wearing and a contact number for any tips about her whereabouts were quickly printed and distributed. By the next morning, a story about the missing girl was aired during the 7 a.m. news, urging anyone with information to come forward. Hundreds of police officers, volunteers, and concerned citizens joined the search for the 14-year-old. They scoured local parks, empty lots, wooded areas, bodies of water, and abandoned buildings. Law enforcement explored various leads, searched for possible witnesses, and interviewed Abigail's friends and family, but every effort turned up empty. The first suspect detectives investigating the case tried to find out if Abigail had any enemies, grudges, or perhaps an overly persistent admirer. But everyone who knew Abigail insisted that she was always the life of the party, a friendly, open, and kind-hearted girl who didn't have any adversaries. She never got into conflicts, and none of her friends had ever heard of anyone stalking or harassing her. One of the first people detectives interviewed was Abigail's boyfriend, Jimmy, who quickly became the prime suspect. They questioned him about whether there had been any disagreements or arguments between them, whether he had any reason to be upset with her, or if he might have had any motive to harm her. But Jimmy seemed stunned by the questions, baffled as to why he was under suspicion, and couldn't fathom how anyone could think he would want to hurt his girlfriend. Jimmy had a rock-solid alibi for the time Abigail went missing, which was backed up not just by his family, but also by his teachers and about a dozen friends that day. His schedule was packed: school sports, practice, rehearsals for an upcoming performance with his school band, and his grandfather's birthday party, all of which he attended without missing a beat. Jimmy fully cooperated with the investigation, telling police everything he knew. But it didn't help move the case forward. It was as if Abigail had vanished into thin air. Despite months of searching, there wasn't a single clue, or even a hint about where to look next. Detectives understood that the chances of finding the teenager alive were dwindling, but Abigail's family refused to give up. A surprising theory: about a month and a half after Abigail's disappearance, her mother found a strange letter from her missing daughter in a mailbox at their home. In the letter, Abigail asked for forgiveness for what she had done, said that she was okay, healthy, and safe. She wrote that she loved her mom and Sarah, but couldn't reveal where she was. At the end of the message, there was a cryptic and rather puzzling phrase: "Dreams come true." Handwriting analysis confirmed that the letter was indeed written by Abigail, and it was dated to early November, which meant there was a high likelihood that the teenager was still alive. But where could she be, and why couldn't she explain the real reason for her disappearance? Was she scared, or had someone forced her to write that letter? Immediately, a theory emerged suggesting that Abigail had voluntarily run away from home, but saw the news story about herself and decided to let her family know she was alive. There was speculation that Abigail might have been pregnant and had run off with the baby's father, afraid of facing her family's anger and the judgment of others. However, the Hernandez family was outraged by this pregnancy and runaway theory. Sarah firmly stated that if her younger sister had been expecting a baby, she would have been the first to know, as they were always very close and had no secrets from each other. Besides, Abigail's only boyfriend was Jimmy, and according to him, they hadn't even been intimate yet. They were both still virgins. Abigail's friends backed this up, confirming that she hadn't dated anyone other than Jimmy, and had never mentioned having any other crushes or relationships. Her best friend Miranda was also adamant that Abigail couldn't have been pregnant and would never have run away, causing so much pain to her mom and older sister. Plus, all of Abigail's documents, personal savings, and valuable belongings were still at home. Investigators thoroughly examined and analyzed the letter, hoping to find any clues or hints about where to look for the girl. Unfortunately, there were no hidden messages or cries for help. Despite this, the FBI got involved in the case, classifying it as an abduction. They believed Abigail was being held against her will, and that the letter had been written under strict orders with no chance to reveal her location. It turned out to be an accurate assumption, as the kidnapper and his victim were just a few dozen miles away from the Hernandez home. What's even more disturbing is that police had visited the kidnapper's house multiple times since Abigail's disappearance, but found nothing suspicious. Meanwhile, the man himself felt trapped and frantically thought about what to do with his captive. Who is Nathaniel Kibby? Now it's time to introduce the kidnapper himself. Nathaniel, or just Nate Kibby, was born on July 15, 1980 in the same town as Abigail. There isn't much reliable information about his family, but some sources suggest that he was raised by his mom alone and never knew his biological father. In his school years, Nathaniel was a real troublemaker, a bully, and that one kid everyone was scared of. He constantly got into fights and clashed with those around him. Even more unsettling, he kept a list of people he disliked, people he planned to beat up or harm in some way from a young age. He displayed aggression and cruelty toward others, making his peers avoid him. while teachers struggled to handle his behavior as a teenager. Young Kibby caught the attention of the police several times for different offenses. He was part of a gang which he took great pride in, had a fascination with firearms, and knew a lot about them. He had multiple run-ins with the law for assault causing serious injuries, illegal possession of substances, and petty theft. But he always got off with just a slap on the wrist. Interestingly, Nathaniel had attended the same high school as Abigail, but since he was 18 years older than her, they never crossed paths either in or outside of school. After finishing high school, it seemed like Nathaniel decided to turn his life around and leave his criminal activities behind. He got a job at a local business where, in general, his co-workers and management were generally positive about him. But a couple of years later, after a serious conflict, Nathaniel quit, moved to the suburbs, and settled in a trailer park in a far from prosperous neighborhood. Neighbors thought he was strange and tried not to get involved with this heiress, an aggressive guy. In 2011, Kibby, who by then was already in his 30s, met and actually cohabited with a young girl. She was from a dysfunctional family, ran away from home, and moved into the adult man's trailer. Remarkably, he didn't even try to hide their close relationship and introduced her as his girlfriend. He got away with all of this and was not punished in any way. In the spring of 2013, Nathaniel attempted kidnapping for the first time, but he luckily failed. He attacked a 15-year-old schoolgirl right at a bus stop near the school and tried to force her into his car. However, she put up fierce resistance, began to break free and call for help. Passers-by ran to the screams, and the attacker promptly left the scene. Surprisingly, despite the testimony of the victim and witnesses, the case was quickly closed, and it never went to trial for some reason. No one thought this guy could pose a real threat. Now let's go back to the day Abigail disappeared, October 9, 2013, as already mentioned. On the eve of her 15th birthday, the girl received a gift of hiking boots that were a little too tight for her. She decided to wear the shoes a little before hiking in the mountains, and wore them to school. Toward the end of class, Abigail Hernandez realized her mistake but didn't give up and walked home. It was getting harder and harder to walk, and each step was painful, but there was still a long way to go home. Suddenly, an old pickup truck driven by Nathaniel pulled up beside her. The smiling young man offered her a ride to wherever she wanted to go, but she refused. Nevertheless, the stranger did not give up and continued to roll slowly beside the potential future victim. Nathaniel noticed Abigail limping a bit and asked her what had happened. Abigail sighed and admitted that her new boots were too tight and had given her a blister. Hearing this, the man simply swung, opened the passenger door, and gestured for her to hop in. After hesitating for a moment, Abigail Hernandez accepted the offer. She assumed that this kind, smiling man couldn't possibly be dangerous. But she was terribly wrong. On the way, Kibby started making small talk, trying to put his victim at ease, and he did a pretty good job of it. Abigail felt safe answering questions and even laughing at his jokes. At one point, the man mentioned that he needed to stop by a hardware store to pick up a few things for a repair job. As they pulled into a dark parking lot, Abigail grew visibly nervous. She told him that her house wasn't far from there and that she could walk the rest of the way. Catching an unsettling look in the driver's eyes, she tried to unbuckle her seatbelt and jump out of the car. But Nathaniel had anticipated her move in one swift motion. He grabbed her by the clothes with one hand and pulled a gun out of the glove compartment with the other. He pointed it directly at Abigail's face and threatened to kill her if she tried to resist the attacker. Then tied her hands and feet with zip ties and put a baseball cap on her head in a way that blocked her view, making sure she couldn't see where they were going. But soon he noticed that Abigail had shifted the cap to try to see the road. This infuriated him. He pulled out a stun gun and shocked her until she lost consciousness. Imprisoned by a deranged sadist, Abigail woke up in a strange, cramped, and stifling space with no windows to give you a clearer picture. It was actually a small shipping container owned by Nathaniel, hidden away in the trailer park, tucked behind some trees. Soon after, the kidnapper appeared with duct tape and a motorcycle helmet in his hands. He taped her mouth and eyes shut, put the helmet on her head, and after making sure she was completely immobilized and helpless, he tore off her clothes and assaulted her. From that moment on, he repeatedly forced himself on her almost every day, turning his twisted fantasies into reality. Nathaniel also used psychological abuse on his captive, threatening to hurt her family if she ever tried to escape or call for help. At the same time, he promised that he'd let her go if she behaved and didn't cause him any trouble. During the first few days of her captivity, Abigail was in a state of shock, practically saying goodbye to her life. But as time passed, she realized that her captor wasn't planning to kill her, at least not yet. She decided to try to connect with him emotionally and see if she could convince him to let her go. She told him that she didn't judge him, that everyone makes mistakes, and that she wouldn't go to the police if he just released her back to her family. However, Nathaniel was unpredictable. The smallest thing or word could set him off, turning him into a monster. Sometimes he would show her a twisted kind of tenderness, but more often he was brutal, using all forms of emotional and physical abuse against her. The container where he kept Abigail was well soundproof, so no one outside could hear her screams. But after about a month, he started bringing her into his trailer, allowing her to take a shower, and even watch TV with him. Through the news, they learned about the extensive search efforts for Abigail. That's when Kibby got the idea to have her write a letter to her mother to convince her that Abigail was okay and to try to stop the search operation. Abigail wrote several letters under her kidnapper's dictation, and each time she tried to leave a hint about where to find her, but Nathaniel saw through it and punished her severely. Eventually, she followed his instructions to avoid provoking his anger. The mystery of the name. About 6 months later, Nathaniel started trusting his captive enough to let her help him with his counterfeit money operation sometimes. He let her sleep in his trailer and even trusted her to cook meals. But he remained as brutal as ever, continuing to abuse Abigail. He forced her to call him master and kept his real name a secret. Gradually, the obedient captive managed to build some rapport with her captor, and he even agreed to bring her books and magazines. One day, on one of the pages, Abby saw the name Nathaniel Kibby, but she wasn't sure if that was really her kidnapper's name. So she decided to take a dangerous gamble. One day, she simply called him by the name, waiting for any kind of reaction, but all he did was roll his eyes, sigh, and calmly ask how she had learned his name. Abigail admitted that she had seen it in one of the books. He smirked, but said nothing help was closer than she knew. Since Abigail spent most of her time in the soundproof container, she had no idea what was happening outside. She didn't know that at one point the police had been just a few feet away from her. But they were there for a completely unrelated reason. You see, Nathaniel had once again broken the law, and in an attempt to avoid serious trouble, he decided to cooperate with law enforcement and confess to illegally possessing a firearm. The police showed up with a search warrant, thoroughly inspecting his trailer, but they didn't even think to check the container for some reason. No one considered taking a look inside. Thanks to his cooperation, Kibby only received a fine and his weapon was confiscated. After all the terrible things he'd done, he still didn't face any real consequences. It seemed luck was on his side, and he probably felt invincible. He had no intention of letting Abigail go, but maybe she had become just another part of his routine. A new girlfriend and a miracle escape. In July 2014, Nathaniel met a woman named Lorraine at a bar. After a brief conversation, he took her back to his trailer, where they became intimate. Later, Lorraine started complaining about her financial struggles, mentioning that she didn't even have enough money to pay her rent. As she was leaving, Nathaniel handed her two $50 bills and she left the next day. A furious Lorraine called Kibby, telling him that the money he'd given her was fake. She screamed that she'd already informed the police about where she got the counterfeit bills and warned him that law enforcement would be showing up with another search warrant soon. What she didn't realize was that her call would change the life of the missing high school girl forever. On July 20th, the kidnapper unexpectedly gave Abigail all her personal belongings, tied her hands, sat her in the passenger seat of his car, and covered her face with a baseball cap. Abigail had no idea what was happening and feared that he was finally going to kill her. But then Nathaniel stopped on a deserted country road, freed Abigail, and simply told her, "Get out and don't you dare go to the police." After she stepped out of the car, he floored the gas pedal and sped off. Abigail couldn't believe what was happening. She walked along the road in a daze until she saw a sign and realized that home wasn't far away. It took her a couple of hours to make the journey, and later interviews she recalled constantly looking over her shoulder, afraid that her kidnapper might come back, but he was nowhere to be seen coming home. The Hernandez family had a surveillance camera at their front door that captured the moment Abigail walked in. Abigail heard her mom talking to someone on the phone and called out loudly to her in shock. Her mother dropped the phone and ran to the door. They hugged each other tightly, crying for a long time, unable to believe that the nightmare was finally over and they were together again. Abigail noticed how much her mother's appearance had changed. She looked older and worn out from the months of worry. Xenia immediately started asking her daughter where she had been all this time and what had happened, suggesting they go straight to the police, but remembering her captor threats. Abigail decided not to turn him in and lied, saying she didn't know who had taken her or where she had been held. Even at the police station, she refused to reveal his name, afraid that Nathaniel would come after her and her family. Over the next week, Abigail wrestled with her thoughts, not sure what to do. Eventually, she decided to tell her mom the truth. Xenia convinced her to go back to the police, arguing that the man who did this needed to be brought to justice. Besides, neither Abigail nor her family could truly feel safe while Kibby was still out there. Arrest, trial, and sentencing. On July 27, 2014, Abigail finally gave the police her kidnapper's name along with the make and license plate of his car. Nathaniel Kibby was arrested the very next day, and to everyone's surprise, he didn't put up any resistance even though he completely denied being guilty. However, when authorities searched his trailer and the container which they finally checked, they found overwhelming evidence proving that Abigail had been held there for months, enduring abuse and suffering. Investigators discovered her hair, blood, sweat, and even broken fingernails. Despite the fact that Nathaniel's guilt was beyond doubt, his lawyer filed a motion in August to have him released on bail. Shockingly, the judge approved this request, causing public outrage and disbelief, but on the same day an order was issued prohibiting Kibby from approaching or contacting any members of the Hernandez family. The trial against Nathaniel Kibby began in December 2014 and continued until May 2016. In an attempt to get a lighter sentence, the defendant agreed to a plea deal and admitted his guilt for his crimes. He was sentenced to 90 years in prison with the possibility of parole. No sooner than after Abigail spoke in court, saying that she forgave her captor and added that because of him she learned to appreciate her life and every moment spent with her loved ones. Even more, her mother also took the stand, stating that while she hated Kibby with all her heart, she was still grateful that he had spared her daughter's life and allowed her to come home. Thank you for watching World True Crime. Abigail Hernandez's story reminds us of the strength it takes to survive and the courage it takes to heal. If you found this story impactful, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for more true crime cases from around the world. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next one.